Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
After this recap, now we are coming to discuss about that the agrarian society and the Mughal Empire in 16th and the 17th centuries. During this 16th and the 17th centuries, nearly 85% of the Indian population they lived in villages. Agriculture was the main occupation of the people. Peasants and landlords were engaged in agricultural production. Agriculture was the common occupation of peasants and landlords, created a relationship of cooperation, competition, and conflict among them. All these things, they have created a relationship of cooperation as well as competition, and they were having conflict as well. This was the main source of revenue of the Mughal Empire. That is why revenue accessor, collectors, and the record keepers, they always try to control the rural society. This was the interest of that the people in this, whosoever is during the Mughal Empire, whosoever the revenue accessor, who they can access, who they can collect and to keep the records, they try always to keep a control over the rural society, to take the control over the rural society. This is now the agrarian society and the Mughal Empire in the 16th and the 17th centuries. The basic unit of agricultural society was what? It is the village. It was inhabited mostly by the peasants everywhere throughout the country. 85% of the Indian population, they lived in villages and their main occupation was agriculture, cultivation of land. They were engaged in agricultural activities throughout the year. They tilled the soil, sowed the seeds, harvested the crops when these were ripened. They also contributed to the production of agro-based commercial crops such as sugar, cotton, and oil seeds. These are now considered as a commercial crops. Our major sources of the agricultural history of the 16th and 17th centuries were the chronicles and documents written by the scholars and supervision of the Mughal court. This is under the supervision of the Mughal court, all these things. In the Aine-Akbari also, we have just now discussed about that. It is maintained in the chronological order. Many other sources are also available, but those sources are not giving us that the very authentic events, and the events are also not organized in a chronological manner. So these were also the defects which were found by the historians while they are turning the pages of the different books which has been written by the different historians during the period of the Mughals. Peasants and their land holdings. This is also the another topic for this Aine-Akbari or the agrarian relations. Sources of 17th century which depicts that there were two kinds of peasants. What were they? The records of the Mughal period most frequently use the term riayat. Riayat is also a term which is used in this during the Mughal period. Also pronounced as Rayat, which is actually originated from the Riaya. Riaya or the Muzarin for the peasants. And a simple English word is for these two terms is peasants. This is all about that. The term Kisan is also been used. Assami is also been used for them. So in different regions of our country, the different names has been given to the cultivators, to the peasants, to the farmers. Either they are the Rayats, they are the Riayas, they are peasants, Kisan, Assami, farmer. These are the different names. But all these, the names, they are involved in the cultivation of the land. So the sources of the history of the 17th century refers to the two kinds of peasants, Khud Kasta, Khud Kashta and the Fahi Kashta. Khud Kasta is explained as the permanently lived in villages, who they are the permanent residents of that village. They are known as the Khud Kasta. They had their own land and practiced agriculture over there, while the Pahi Kasta, they cultivated land on a contractual basis. They are not the owner of the land, they are not the inhabitant of the area of that village, which originally belonged to the someone else, and they are cultivating the land on the basis of the rent or as a tenant. In North India, the average peasant seldom possessed more than a pair of bullocks and plows. In Northern India, in the peasants, they are not very rich. Only a pair of bullock and a plow is there for the cultivation. But when it is compared to the different region, example is quoted about Gujarat. The Gujarat peasants owned about 6 acres of land and they were considered to be prosperous. In Bengal, in contrast, on the other hand, 5 acres of land was the upper limit of an average peasant's holding. So this is the difference even in northern India, also in western side, in eastern side and in the central India. The position of the peasants are different. Agriculture was mainly organized in two major seasons. They were Rabi and Kharif. And maximum 2 crops were sown in a year. This is the concept of the cultivation in our country. Then most important thing, it comes about that irrigation. For the constant expansion of agriculture, 4 factors were necessary. What were the 4 factors? They were the abundance of land. First of all, for the cultivation, land is required, most important factor. Then the second, it comes about the agricultural facilities, irrigation facility, availability of labor and the mobility of the peasants. But agriculture cannot afford to be dependent on exclusively on rainfall or the monsoon rain. In our country, these peasants, most of the area, the peasants, they're dependent upon the monsoon. But for all the crops, for all the agricultural productivity, exclusively these peasants, they cannot depend upon the rainfall. So what are the other type of the method or the facilities provided by the ruler to them? These crops, some of the crops, they need or they require the additional water for the cultivation. So the peasant had to arrange for artificial system of irrigation. In those days also the artificial system was provided. In northern India, the state realized the necessity digging new canals. New canals were also dug with the help of the administration, and as well as the old ones is also been repaired. One example is also quoted over here about the Sahnahar, which is in the Punjab, and it was repaired during the period of Shah Jahan by Ali Mardan Khan. So this way the irrigation facility is to be provided to the peasants for the maximum revenue collection. This was the main motive of the administrators, to collect the maximum revenue. So how to increase the productivity of the land? Next, it comes about that technology. The peasants use technologies that often harnessed cattle energy. The wooden plow, which was light and easily assembled with an iron tip or sharp blade, but it didn't make deep furrows. So such type of the technology was used for them. A drill Other than this, a drill by a pair of oxen was used to plant seeds, but broadcasting of seed was the common practice. Hoeing and weeding were done by using a narrow iron blade having a small wooden handle. So these were the technologies. Actually, we can say that these were the tools and the implements were used by the farmers for the cultivation of the land. Then it comes about that the varieties of agricultural produce. In our country, there are two major crops. We have Rabi and Kharif. One is grown in the autumn season, another is in the spring season. So, what is in the growing season? If we talk about that, then Rabi, the harvesting is done in the Rabi season, and the Kharif, the paddy, is in the autumn season. Many new crops, other than these two major crops, new crops like maize, tomatoes, potatoes, and chilies were introduced here from the New World in the 17th century. These are not the original crop of our country. It has been brought by the foreigners to our country. Maize is also not the Indian product. It is brought from the American continent. Tomatoes, potatoes, chilies, these are from the foreign countries. In India, we have the pepper from the South India, not that the chilies. Mughal provinces produced 39 varieties of produce. This is 39 varieties of produce, and Delhi produced over 43 crops in 2 seasons. The different types of the crops were grown. And in Bengal region, 50 varieties of rice were grown. This way, India was rich in the cultivation. Cotton was grown as jis-e-kamil in central India and Deccan Plateau, where the black soil is. Bengal was famous for sugar. Cash crops included various sorts of oilseeds, mustard, and lentil. Now, to recap the topic, what we have just now discussed, which different names were used for peasants during the Mughal Empire? That is Raiyat, then Kisan, Asami. These are the name of the peasants used in the different region of our country. What are Rabi and Kharif crops? Autumn crops are Kharif, and spring crops Rabi. What was Jinse Kamil? Jinse Kamil means the perfect crop. Who headed the panchayat in the Mughal Empire? It may be named as headman or mukaddam or mandal. Name few artisans lived in the villages. They were potters, blacksmith, barbers, goldsmith, etc. Next is about that caste-based village community or the caste distinctions in the rural society. The village community is actually involved in that the intensive participation and initiative of the peasantry. So how did it affect the structure of agrarian relations in Mughal society and how the social groups were involved in agricultural production? And what were their mutual relations and conflicts? So which we are coming to discuss over here. There were three constituents of village community: the cultivators, the panchayat and the village headman. Village headman is also known as Muqaddam or Mandal. The cultivators were a highly heterogeneous group. Heterogeneous means the different caste groups. Caste inequalities were there and certain castes were assigned menial tasks and thus face the poverty. Already in the previous chapters we have discussed about that, how our Indian society was different into the different caste categories. Some of them they are recognized as the higher class group and some they are supposed or forced actually to perform the menial jobs. So there was a direct correlation between caste, poverty and social status at the lower strata of society. So nowhere our society is left that they are not following this caste system. Everywhere it is. Sometimes caste rose in the hierarchy because of their developing economic conditions. As this the menial, the people or the excluded the section of society, they are not supposed to possess property. So they are the poor people. Brahmins, as they are the topmost class, Kshatriyas, the ruling class, the second category, Vaishyas, through the trade and business, they earn the profits. So this way, this hierarchy of the caste system, they have also misdeveloped the economic conditions. Their economy is their status of the, and we can say that their standard of living is also very high in the society. So there is a wide gap between the rich and poor since the ancient time in our country. So what happens in this? In mixed caste villages, the panchayat represented various castes and communities in the village. Though village menial agricultural worker were not included in this. Now, the village administration, which is known as the village panchayat, when it is constituted, the menial job or the menial work performers or the workers who they are supposed to do the menial job, they are not included, they are not the part of the village panchayat. So this way the caste distinction was followed in the society or in the villages. Next is about the village panchayat. Village panchayat was elected by the assembly of the elders. The headman of the panchayat was called Mandal or Muqaddam. He enjoyed his post until he had the confidence of the elders of villages. This panchayat is actually constituted with the consent of the elder members of the village. The village panchayat had the right to levy fines and expulsion of anyone from the community, and expulsion from the community was a strict step, was meted out for a limited period. So this way the strict rules were followed by the villagers. Not only that, it is the duty of the village panchayat to give them the punishment, but whosoever is punished, they have to follow it very strictly. It was very difficult to recognize the difference between peasants and the artisans. It was so because both these two groups used to perform both kinds of works. People such as potters, carpenters, blacksmiths, barbers, goldsmiths, etc., provided their services to the villagemen and were compensated through villagers by a large number of means. So this now we are coming to discuss about that. This Jajmani system was also prevalent there. In the village society, in the rural society, Jajmani system was also prevalent. Under this system, blacksmiths, carpenters, and goldsmiths were remunerated by jamindars of Bengal for their work by paying them a small daily allowance, diet, and money. So this way, the Jajmani system was also followed in the villages. This is actually one example is quoted over here about the Bengal, region of Bengal. But archival records in Western India, mostly from Rajasthan and Maharashtra, that also contain petitions sent to the Panchayat complaining against unjust taxes or the demands for unpaid labor, which is begar, imposed by superior caste or by government officials. Most of such petitions were made by villagers from the lowest classes of the rural society. They try to raise their voice against that the injustice. Either it is done by the higher class people, society people, or higher caste people, or by the government. Generally, petitions were made collectively by a caste group or the community that unity protesting against morally unjust demand of the elite group. These petitions regarded the village panchayat as the court of appeal that would guarantee justice. So with this motive only, the caste group, they try to lead and to raise their voice against the injustice. In case of excessive revenue demands of the officials, the panchayats often suggested some compromise. In case where reconciliation failed, the peasant deserted the village as a protest. So this is the final decision. The peasants, they try to leave if suppose that the compensation was not done, assurance is there only, then what they do, the final decision they take, they have left their villages, they are deserting their villages. Now, position of artisans in the village economy. What is their contribution? What are the contribution of the artisans in the economy of the village? People such as potters, carpenters, blacksmiths, barbers, goldsmiths, etc. provided their services to the villagemen and were compensated through villagers by a large number of means. Jajmani system was also prevalent. Under this system, blacksmiths, carpenter, goldsmiths, they were remunerated by jamindars of Bengal for their work by paying them a small daily allowances in a form of a just diet and money. This is the work done by this in the area of Bengal region. Another type of the system, which is the payment was the individual peasant household was to give the remuneration for their services. In the 18th century, the jamindars, they are remunerating this in a form of a just allowance, diet, or some of them they are granting that the land also to cultivate and to keep the crop as their remuneration. So this is all about the artisans and their contribution in the village economy. Next is about that the medieval village, the republic, the concept of the little republic, about that with the concept of the village panchayat. In the 19th century, some British officials saw the village as a little republic made up of, this is the fraternal partners sharing resources and labor commonly, but this was not a sign of rural egalitarianism. That the egalitarianism is that the economic equality is not there. There existed individual ownership of assets and inequalities based on caste and gender discriminations. There were powerful groups of individuals who decided the affairs of the village. some of the group of the people, they are the decision makers for the village, exploited the downtrodden, and had the authority to administer justice. The system of payment in cash had already begun for trade between villages and towns. The system of the medium of exchange as money was already introduced. In some parts of the Mughal Empire, revenue was assessed and collected in cash. The artisans who produced for the export markets, such as weavers, received their wages in cash, as did the producers of commercial crops like cotton, silk, and indigo. This is also about that the small producers, the producers of the commercial crops, they also receive that the cash payment. Next is about that the role of women in agrarian society. This is the main. Men and women performed certain specified functions in the process of agricultural production. Even today also they are working shoulder to shoulder in the fields. This way the women, their contribution is there in the rural society. Women played an important role in artisanal tasks such as spinning yarn, sifting and kneading clay for the pottery and embroidery. The agrarian society considered women was an important source because they are the childbearers in a society and dependent on labor. As a woman was a productive force, it was felt necessary to keep control over them. The male members of the family and the community always kept strict control over women. So this is the right given to the male member. As they are the physically strong, so they have started taking control over the strict control over women. They could inflict severe punishments on women if they were suspected or infidelity on their part. So this is about that. This is the in agrarian society, the woman is an important resource because they were the childbearers. So what it says that at the same time, his mortality rate among women owing to malnutrition or deaths during the childbirth led to shortage of women. It led to the growth of social customs in peasant and artisan communities that were quite different from those prevalent among the elite groups. In many rural communities, marriages required the payment of bride price rather than dowry to the bride's family. Remarriage was allowed both among divorced and the widowed women. Both the places it is been allowed. As a woman of productive force, it was felt necessary to keep control over them. According to the social customs, a male was the head of household. Male member is the head of the household, and the male members of the family and the community always they kept strict control over women, and they could inflict severe punishments if they are suspected with the infidelity on their part. In some of the documents that have been discovered from Gujarat and Rajasthan, the record of petitions sent by women to village panchayats seeking redress and justice. In some of the places it has been done in the state of Gujarat and Rajasthan. In the petitions, what the women they have written, they are posted against that the infidelity of their husbands and the neglect of the children. The infidelity was not always punished, but the state and superior caste groups arranged to provide some relief to the family. In most cases, when women sent petition to the panchayat, their names were deleted from the records. They are not writing their names. Otherwise, they are punished by their husbands, by the male members of the family. So instead, the petitioners was referred to as the mother or sister of the male head of the family. This way, this is the only the position of women in the landed gentry was better. Who they are the elite, the wealthy family in the society. Their condition of the woman was a little bit better than the rural women. They had the right to inherit property. In the Punjab, women, including widows, actively participated in the rural land market as seller of property inherited by them. Hindu and Muslim women could inherit jamindaris, which they were free to sell or mortgage. These are the myths that the caste specific groups are there, certain regions, certain states are there, where they have given that the different facilities and the priorities to the women. But mostly the women in rural India, they were not getting that the very respected position. So there are references of to the women jamindars in the 18th century Bengal. In fact, among the names of the most famous of the 18th century jamindaris, that of a Raja Shasi, woman jamindar, is mentioned. She was from Punjab region. Among the landed gentry, women enjoyed the right to inherit property, but not everywhere. Only in the part of Gujarat, Rajasthan, and Punjab, these facilities were available for the women. Then forest tribals. The term jungli was used to describe those whose livelihood come from hunting, gathering, and from the forest produces. They are considered as the forest tribals. These are in the medieval period, the dense forest, the jungles, or the scrublands, which is the Kharbandi, existed all over eastern India, central India, northern India, Jharkhand, and in the parts of the Deccan Plateau. It is estimated that an all India average of forest cover was 40%. 40% of the land of India was covered with the forest. Example is given over here about the Wheels. The Wheel tribal group that reserved spring season for collecting. Now it is about that the what type and the how that in the different seasons. This the different tribal group of the people, they are kept on moving from one place to another. Why they are the nomadic people? Why they are not living at the one place? What is the reason behind it? So one example is quoted over here about the Wheels. The Wheel tribals reserved spring season for collecting forest produce, summer for fishing, the monsoon for cultivation, and autumn and winter for hunting. So this way, with that, the different seasons, they are utilizing their work and they are changing their work. Spring is for the collecting forest produce, summer for fishing, and monsoon for cultivation, and autumn and winter for hunting. This sequence requires the tribals to move from one place to another. It is the distinctive feature of the tribals inhabiting these forests. Also, it mentions the existence of tribal kingdoms in the northeastern India. The Mughal rulers also, this is what they are telling about that. The hunt symbolized a great concern of the state to ensure justice to all their subjects, how high or low, rich or poor. The court historians tell that the regular hunting expeditions enabled the emperor to travel across a large part of his empire and personally hear the complaints of its inhabitants. For these purposes, the hunting was fruitful for the ruler, fruitful for the king. An important factor that affected the lives of those who lived in the forest was the spread of commercial agriculture. Forest produce like honey, beeswax, and gum that were in great demand. In the 17th century, some items such as gum, lac began to be exported from India. Elephants were also captured from the forest and sold in the plains. Some social factors which also brought the changes in the lives of the forest people, like influential and powerful men in the village community. The forest tribes also had their chieftains. Many tribal chiefs became jamindars. Some even rose to be kings also. They built up their own army for this purpose, to become the ruler, to protect the forest. They They recruited people from their lineage groups or asked their fraternity to provide military service. For instance, some tribes in the Sindh region had armies composed of 6,000 cavalry and 7,000 infantry. Can you imagine about that? Just like as the other ruler, other emperor, they also have their own army. In Assam, the Ahom rulers, their packs, people who were made to render military services in exchange for land. So this way the different systems are followed in the different parts of our country. The Ahom kings declared that the capture of the wild elephants was a royal monopoly. So this way the rewards were also been given. But the transition from a tribal to a monarchical system had fully developed by the 16th century, not before that. The Ainari mentions the existence of tribal kingdoms in the northeast India and the kings restored to use of force to subjugate the tribals. For instance, the Koch king subjugated a number of tribal neighboring tribes by wars throughout the 16th and the 17th century. So this 16th and the 17th century, this is very important for the tribal group of people also, because before this they were not having the concept of the king and the ruler, to how to protect their territory, who will be the chief of the tribal group of the people. So the forest zones were also influenced by the new cultural influences. Some scholars are of the view that Sufi saints played a significant role in conversion of agricultural communities to Islam in newly colonized area. Newly colonized means that the colonial power, when they have started capturing the India and trying to rule over there. Then a new concept of the Sufism also developed in our country. Next, the very important thing comes in the context of the village. They are the Jamindars, this system. The Jamindars were a class of landowners who lived of agriculture but did not take a part in the process of agricultural production. Jamindars, but they are not the cultivators, they are not the tillers of the land. They are the owners of the land. So what it says, again, we are coming to the same point that 17th and 16th and the 17th century, most of the population of India, that is 85%, lived in villages. Both peasants and landed elites were involved in agricultural production and claimed their rights to have a share of the total produce. The Jamindars enjoyed certain social and economic privileges because of their superior status in the rural society. It was an important factor which gave an elevated status to them. Another important factor was that they performed some services, that is khidmats, for the rulers. This is the another work done by Jamindars. Every Jamindar, they own extensive personal lands. They are called the milkiyat, meaning property. The Jamindars got their personal lands cultivated by hired or the servile laborers, who they are the means just like as the slave bonded laborers. Its produce was for the personal use of the Jamindars. Whatever the production comes from the land which were cultivated by for the personal land of the Jamindars, that is for their own consumption. The Jamindars had the right to sell, bequeath, or mortgage their personal lands at their will. It depends upon their will. Another source of power of Jamindars was that they could collect revenue on behalf of the state. This is the another important work which is done by Jamindars, which is related to that the revenue collection. They were compensated for this service financially. Compensation also they were getting if suppose they are doing the work of the collection of revenue. The Jamindars also controlled military resources. Most of the Jamindars had fortresses, which is the kilchas, and armed contingents, including units of infantry, cavalry, and artillery. All these were there with the jamindars. Whenever the king or the ruler they required, they are supposed to supply to their rulers. The further strengthen their positions. It depends upon that what is the strength of their infantry, the cavalry, and the artillery. The social structure of rural area was like a pyramid. The jamindars clearly enjoyed a very high position in it. Abul Fazl also, he wrote in his account that upper caste, Brahman, Rajput combined had this is certainly established firm control over the rural society. The Brahmins and the Rajputs means collectively they are controlling the rural society. It also indicates a fairly large representation from the so-called intermediaries castes, as well as a liberal sprinkling of Muslim jamindars. So this is the jamindars or jamindari consolidation were very slow. No doubt, this is the very slow process. These process involve colonization of new lands by transfer of rights, by orders of the state and by purchase. It is probably that these were the process which permitted people of lower caste to become jamindars. Now this is the what we can say that a chance is given to them, to the lower class people who they were supposed to do only the menial jobs. Now they can also purchase and they can also become the jamindars, because jamindari were brought and sold very frequently in this period. Various factors were combined to allow the consolidation of clan or lineage based jamindaris. One instance is quoted over here about the Rajputs and Jats who adopted methods. Jats were from Uttar Pradesh. They have adopted the methods of consolidate their control over vast territories in northern India. The present pastoralists such as the Sadgovs established powerful jamindaris in some areas of central and the southwest Bengal. Bengal region is very important for this system. But the jamindari began the process of colonization of agricultural land. They helped in settling the cultivators by providing them with the means of cultivation. The peasants, they are also getting these facilities from their jamindars. They also advance them cash loans. They purchase the sale of jamindaris with the monetization in the rural areas. Then the jamindars also sold the produce from their personal lands, that is milkiyat. Then what it is says that there is no doubt that the jamindari as a class exploited the cultivators. This is about that. Without any fail, we can say that they are exploiting the cultivators. But their relations with the peasants were marked by the elements of reciprocity. Then that is the paternalism and the patronage. This view is supported by two facts. Number one is about that the Bhakti saints who vehemently condemned caste waste and the other form of oppression. Generally, the revenue officials of the state were the object of their ire. Next is about that in a large number of agrarian uprisings which broke out in the northern India or in North India in the 17th century, jamindars often had the support of peasantry in their struggle against the state, against the government. Jamindari consolidation was a very slow process. It could not be done through various sources like colonization of new lands, by transfers of rights with the order of the state, and by purchase. These were those processes which perhaps permitted lower caste to reach to the ranks of jamindars. It played an important role in colonization of agricultural land. helped the settling cultivators by providing them with means of cultivation and cash loans. These all the facilities were provided by the Jamindars. Aine Akbari discussed many matters in details, that is the court and administration of the empire, source of revenue, literal, literary, cultural, and the religious traditions of the people. Everything which is related to the administration, their religion, their culture, everything is discussed in Aine Akbari in detail by Abul Fazl. So this Aine Akbari remained an extraordinary document for its time, even after certain drawbacks. Next is about that the land revenue system of Mughal Empire. How the land revenue were collected. Babur and Humayun did not make any suitable changes in the land revenue system which they had inherited from the Pathan kings. The same was followed by Babur and Humayun. They continued to raise land revenue through Jagirdars. Whenever they conquered any new land, they gave them to their close relatives or associates in the form of Jagirs, and they paid a fixed sum of money to the state. So this was the Jagirdari system. Whatever the new land which is captured or controlled, consolidated or annexation is done by this Babur or Humayun, what they do? They are giving this territory to their relatives. And those relatives were known as the Jagirdars. And the territory which is occupied by them were known as Jagirdari. The first Muslim ruler who made a systematic land survey was Sher Shah Suri, and he laid down the main principles which were followed in the time of Akbar. What were the proposals and the things which has been introduced by Sher Shah Suri? For this, the land revenue related to the land revenue collections, even though the Akbar also followed the same principle. The land was surveyed, measured, and the peasant was required to pay 1/4 of the total produce. This was the system. 1/4 of the produce was collected as a revenue. This system was started by Sher Shah Suri. The officials were instructed not to oppose the peasants, but Sher Shah's regime was too short, which led to put the whole system in working order. Much of this excellent work done by him was the upset during the anarchy and confusion that prevailed after his death. The laws which is made fell into disuse. There is no use of that. Because of that, is the very short duration he was the ruler of our country. When Humayun was restored to the throne, the Mughal Empire was divided into two parts: the Khalsa or crown lands and Jagir lands. This is now the two things came. One is Khalsa and the second is about the Jagir. These two lands came. A large portion of the empire was cut off in Jagirs and given to the nobles and the amirs, who paid a stipulated amount to their patron and emperor. So these all the new posts were declared by the emperor. The Khalsa land seemed to have followed the old practice of crop division. Humayun did not feel any difficulty because the empire was rather small and the nobles were of a simple nature. So Humayun did not bring any change in the revenue system. So some of the system which were introduced by Sher Shah Suri is followed by Akbar. Little bit the change has been developed and discussed. That the entire empire was divided during the Mughal period under the Humayun, the Khalsa or the crown, and the another is for the Jagir lands. Now coming to discuss about that, this actually what were the provisions during the period of Akbar, the structure of agrarian relations, and which is related to the Akbar's court. What were the new development took place in the period of Akbar? So it is given about that Reforms in the other sphere of administration, the revenue department also felt the master's touch. Aine-Akbari gives in detail the revenue reforms brought by Akbar. When Akbar appointed Khwaja Abdul Mazid Khan, the Diwan of the Diwan, the total revenue was taken after estimate and the assignments were increased as the caprice of the moment suggested. An attempt was made to fix roughly the revenue of the various sarkars. Sarkars means that the districts. Sarkar's word is used in the chapter in place of the districts. Or to ascertain the prices of foodstuffs, but not much success was achieved. Whatever this, the new thing were introduced during the period of Akbar, and according to the record of Aine Akbari, what we are getting the idea, it was not very successful. So, what Akbar did, he took more definite steps to settle the revenue when Muzaffar Khan, a Tarbati, became Diwan in the 15th century. At the age of the 15th year of his reign, with the help of the Toderman, he tried to reorganize the whole system. Toderman has served under Sher Shah during his short lived regime and had acquired considerable experience in revenue affairs. So, this was the main reason behind it. Toderman was appointed as a Diwan during the Akbar's period also. So, as per the first step, what the Todarmal did, a Kanungo were appointed to collect the data relating to the revenue masters and were asked to find the exact nature of the land tenure. The estimates were to be made on the basis of the estimates furnished by the provincial Kanungos. Every province, they have their own Kanungo for the estimation of the land, for the categorization of the land. Then, what is the work done by them? The efforts produced no important results because the whole scheme was interrupted by a Uzbek rebellion in Gujarat. After the Gujarat was conquered in 1573, Toderman was sent to bring about a peaceful settlement of the province, and he carried out for the first time a regular survey of land. So what happened? The whole territory of the empire was divided into, this is now coming to discuss about that in the 1575. The Jagirs were abolished and the whole territory of the empire was divided into 182 parganas, each of which yielded a crore year of a year of as revenue, 1 crore. And the officers in charge of these parganas were called the Karoris. They seem to have been greedy and corrupt officers. This is about that. This is also given over here. The office of the Diwan is the revenue officers and the record keeper, and all became important for the agricultural domain. The land revenue arrangements consisted of two states, that is the first assessment, Jama, and then actual collection, that is Hasil. But the cultivated and the cultivable lands were measured in each province. Each and every province, there the land measurement was done. And according to this, the land measurement, the land was divided into the 4 different categories. This is the measurement of land. The method of measurement was defective. Sher Shah had introduced Jarib of hem rope, and through this measure, the officers could do a lot of mischief. Akbar, as Aine Akbari tells, introduced a new type of tanav, a zarib of bamboo with 2 iron rings of both the sides. Sher Shah's measuring yard was of 32 digits. Akbar fixed a yard of 41 digits. With this new zarib, the tanav, the whole land under cultivation was measured. A separate record of pastures, jungles, and lakes was maintained. The revenue officers were ordered not to change any commission for measurement. Whatever the area is there for the lake, for the pond, for pasture, for jungle, everything has to be measured without any change. They were paid by the government at the rate of 1 dam per bigha. Akbari records that the land were classified and different rates of revenue were to be paid for the each. Four classes of land were as under. This is about the lands were in the Polas, Parati, then Chachar and Banjar. These are the four categories of the land. For the measurement, it has been recorded. Polas, which was annually cultivated for each crop in succession and never allowed to be followed. Throughout the year, the two crops were there, they have to grow both the crops. This was the land under continuous cultivation and yielded revenue from year to year. This is the Polaj. Then Parati occasionally left fallow in order to recover its strength. Chachar allowed to remain fallow for about 4 years in order to regain fertility. Banjar, this is remain out of cultivation for more than 5 years. So this is all the four category of the land, and according to that, with this measurement of the land only, the revenue was supposed to be paid. The first two were further divided into three grades: middling and bad according to fertility. The average of these grades was to be estimated produced per bigha. This is per bigha and was to serve as the basis of assessment. So on this basis only the assessment has to be done. Now coming to that, the process of assessment, how it has been done. The assessment was done by the Alam Guzar. This is the new post introduced in the in the Mughal period. Besides the average produced per bigha, other circumstances were also taken into consideration. That is access to water, then they have the sanitation. Other than this sanitation, access to water, etc. The great care was taken to a portion of the different descriptions among the peasantry in such a way as to give benefit to all. To give the benefit to all these things, the assessment has been done. After taking all these factors into consideration, the state would charge 1/3 of the average produce as state share from Polas and the Parati lands. This is after taking all these factors into consideration. This is the 1/3. After that, what the state does, what the government does, they charge only, they only charge that the 1/3. What they are asking for that, the 1/3 of the 1/3 of the average produce as states from Pulas and the Parati lands. Then in case of the Chachar and the Banjar, the government charged little in the first few years, and it was from the 5th year onwards that the state demanded 1/3. So this way, the gradual development with the proper assessment of the land, the government is asking for the payment of the revenue. So the example is, some of the example is also given in the chapter is about that. In Banjar, they have the first when the land, for this is actually about given for the Banjar land. When land was cultivated for the first year, the state charged 1/26 a year, and then in the following years, the state demand was increased gradually in the following years. In the first year, second year 1/13, third year 2/13, fourth year 3/13, and the fifth year 1/3. So this is the gradual, this increase in the revenue system according to that the assessment of the land. Now we are going to start with commutation. Having fixed demand in kind, it was necessary to commute it into cash payment. Now the concept of the cash payment was there. Having fixed the state demand in kind, it was necessary to commute it into cash payment. The old practice was to commute the produce into cash rates according to the prices current at that time. So this was the process, but this was a very troublesome method as a periodical ascertainment of cash rates is entailed much unnecessary expenditure and caused much delay in collections. So this was not a very suitable thing. So this practice was not been started. Then what happened? During the period of Akbar, table of rates was introduced. According to this, the table of rates, what Akbar wanted, that the government share of land revenue should be preferably collected in cash. This is actually the demand of the Akbar. For this purpose, he has prepared schedules of cash or the tables of cash. So according to this, what are these? And this is actually the table of tables of rates or schedules of cash is different circles. These tables of schedules of cash rates were prepared on the basis of average rates of different crops. Now, the different crops is having the different table of rates, which prevailing for last 10 years in a particular circle. And the average is been calculated. For instance, in Lahore, while determining the rate of wheat, the last 10 years average price was taken to be the standard price of the wheat in that area. So the average is taken out of the last 10 years and on that basis that assessment is been done. So similarly for cotton, gram, etc., there were 95 such schedules of rates prepared for different areas. At times, the commutation was reconsidered on the request of the peasant and he was allowed to pay in kind if suppose that the commutation was reconsidered. This is also a provision made by Akbar. If suppose any of the peasant not in such a position to pay in cash, then reconsideration can be done on the request put up by the peasant. And he was allowed to pay in kind if he thought that the cash rate was fixed is too high. The commutation business was done by the government officers and the cash rate was fixed by them. So this way also the reconsideration process was there for the commutation. Then collection of revenue is also a part of this. Then how the collection of revenue was done? The revenue was collected twice a year. First at the time of when the Rabi crop was harvested and secondly at the time of the Kharif crop was ready. The village headman called Muqaddam helped the Alam Guzar and his subordinates such as Potdars in the collection. Then Muqaddam received 2.5% of his commission at the time of the collection. In general instruction of the emperor to the revenue officer was the first to collect the arrears and then the demand of the season. So first to clear the arrear, if suppose any arrear is there, the previous years the revenue has not been paid, then the first it has to be cleared and then the season, the demand for the current season is put up upon the peasants. These officers were instructed to deal kindly with the cultivators and not to extend the land of demand out of season. So in order to check the rapacity of the revenue officials, the state had instructed the system of patta and the kabuliyat. The patdar, that is the treasurer, was also required to issue official receipts for the revenue receipt. So that the proper revenue collection was there and that on the receipt basis that the peasants who they have paid their revenue, they receive the receipts also. Above this system, the land settlement was called the Jabti system. It prevailed in the Subas of Bihar, Allahabad, Multan, Awadh, Agra, Malwa, Delhi, Lahore and in certain parts of Ajmer and Gujarat. The Aine-Akbari speaks definitely of three systems under the names of Galbaks. This is the Jabti and the Nask. These are the three names. The system prevailed in Hatta and the parts of the Suwas of Kabul and Kashmir. Nask was another important system of land revenue which was prevailing in some provinces of Akbar's empires like Bengal, including Orissa, the whole of Berar and Kashmir. Akbar's successors, it prevailed and new more provinces. A few more provinces were succeeded by the Akbar successors. It was Rayatwari rather than a Jamindari arrangement. In this system, there was no intermediary between the Rayat and the states. These Rayats, they have their direct contact with the government officials, to the collectors, revenue collectors. There were also some other systems in sharing of the produce. The Batai or Bhaveli system prevailed in the Thatta and the Kandhar in Akbar's times. There was another method, that is Kankui, which means determining the share through the rough estimate of standing crops, and on his general estimate the state demand its share. None of these systems had the same elaborated organization of the Japti system which prevailed in the greater part of the empire. So this is all about that, the Japti and the Hasil system, how these systems has been prevailed in the different parts of the country, some during the period of the Akbar and some by his successors. Then critical estimate of Akbar's land settlement system and agrarian structure. This is the land reforms revenue reference of the past. He was the first to start the reform of land revenue system. Sher Shah Suri before him had some important experiments, but it cannot minimize the importance of Akbar's reforms. He introduced the new practices in the revenue system which greatly increased the prosperity of the cultivators. This is the 17th century Shroff. Shroff means the banker, the exchanger. He exchanged the money with the commodities. The flow of silver. This is now this about the flow of silver and its impact on economy. So what it is, how this the silver was produced in India and what was its impacts on the Indian economy. Coming to discuss about that, the Mughal Empire had managed to consolidate its power and resources during the 16th and the 17th century. This entire chapter is actually we are discussing between these two centuries, 16th and the 17th. It was one of the largest territorial power in Asia, like the Ming is the old name of China, Safavid, Iran, and Ottoman is the Turkey now. The sea voices of discovery and opening up of the new world. New world is America. If you have remembered last year's history book, the changing cultural traditions. This is actually the new world is the word used for the America, had resulted in astonishing expansion of Asia's, particularly India's trade with Europe in a variety of articles with the foreign countries brought in huge amount of silver bullion into India. This a large amount is known as the bullion. It was very beneficial for India because this is the voices of discovery and opening of the new world. New world. New world is here with the USA. What it is? The America is known as the new world. The expanding red trade brought in huge amounts of silver bullion into Asia to pay for goods. This was good for India as it did not have natural resources of silver. How it was beneficial for our country. So what it says that as a result, the 16th and the 17th century saw a remarkable stability in the availability of the metal currency in our country, especially of the silver rupiah in India. This facilitated the minting of coins and the circulation of money in the economy. It also increased the ability of the Mughal state to extract taxes and revenue in cash from its subjects and its tributary states. So as a result, the 16th and there was remarkable stability in the silver currency. The account of an Italian traveler. This is given over here. It is about that. This is Giovanni Carelli, who passed through India in about 1690 AD, tells how the silver traveled across the globe to reach India. He also mentions that there were cash and the commodity transactions on a large scale in the 17th century India. Due to the commodity transactions, India has received this silver in bullion. The peasantry and the famines. What it says, this is the last topic of the chapter. This is about the peasantry and the famine. The one cannot propose. This is the presuppose a country depending on agriculture without facing failure of crops, resulting in the starvation and deaths. Famine relief, if managed properly, is a tribute to the stability of the state and its economic well-being. If the stability has to be maintained during the famine. We study how famines were dealt with the within those days. Famines were frequent in the 16th and the 17th century. A famine broke out in the neighborhood of Agra and the Bayana in 1551-56, which rendered the whole countryside desert. In 1573 and 74, a serious famine occurred in Gujarat and was followed by epidemics. Prices rose high and the people suffered grievously. In 1585 broke out another terrible famine which lasted for 3 years. Can you imagine about that? The streets were blocked up with the dead bodies. Akbar was the first ruler to start relief measures to famine stricken areas, and an officer was appointed by him for this purpose. He was the first emperor who has appointed an officer and to distribute the relief. Grain was supplied free from the imperial granaries, but the state help was hardly enough to mitigate the sufferings of the people. No serious famine occurred during the Jahangir's reign, though there was deficiency of rain in his time. During the reign of Shah Jahan, however, broke out the most serious famine in the central parts of India during the 1630 to 31. Abdul Hamid Lahori, he describes the horrors of the famines. The number of the dying caused destructions on the roads, and every man whose sufferings did not terminate in death and who retained the power to move wandered off to the towns and villages of other countries. Those lands which had been famous for fertility and the plenty now retain no trace of productivity. No serious famine like 1630-31 broke out during the reign of Aurangzeb, but his perpetual wars caused much distress. Cultivation was neglected and thousands of the peasants were reduced to a state of misery. So this is all about that. The chapter, what we have collected, the idea which is written in Aine Akbari, the entire chapter is based on that. Although the perfect things are not available, but as it is arranged in a very systematic manner known as the chronological order, is very fruitful for us to learn about the history or the facts during the Mughal period. This is the questions which we have to solve at the end of the chapter. What work was done by women in the fields during the Mughal period? We have to just name the few of the work like the sowing of seeds, then weeding and pressing, winnowing, who were called Jangli during the Mughal period. Who were called the Jangli? The forest tribals or the forest dwellers. What were the features of Pola's land? The four different types of the land which we have discussed just now is the features of the Pola's land was that the most important thing is that the land under continuous cultivation. This Pola's land is continuous cultivation. Under the continuous cultivation and yielding revenue to. Then next is differentiate between Chachar and Banjar. So what is Chachar? This is actually allowed to remain fallow then it is Banjar. Banjar remained out of some of these important terms are there of this chapter is Rayat. It is used to denote a peasant in Indo-Persian sources. Hasil, it was the actual amount of revenue collected. Khud Khasta, peasants is the peasants who were the residents of the village in which they had their lands. Pahi, Pahi Kasta, the peasants who generally belong to another village. Shroff, a money changer who also acts as a banker. Amin, the officials that were responsible for imperial regulations. Pargana and administrative subdivision. Jama, the assessed amount and to be collected as revenue. So these are some of the important terms which is used several times in the chapter. That's all. Thank you.